right, now come on in here. Pull up a seat, baby. No, for real. Get comfortable. Go on and grab that plush velvet throw pillow off the chaise, the emerald green one. Auntie's got a story for you today that is going to shake you to your core, rearrange your spirit, and probably make you want to go key somebody's car. It's one of those stories that reminds you that the devil works hard, but a woman scorned, a woman who has been pushed to the absolute brink, child, she works harder. And the universe always, and I mean always, keeps the receipts. It's got a whole filing cabinet, honey, alphabetized and cross-referenced, just waiting for the right moment to pull a file. This one is about a sweet girl named Keisha, and what happened to her will make your blood boil, but I promise you, if you stick with me, the ending will give you life. It's a story about betrayal so deep it could crack the planet, but it's also about the kind of strength that can move mountains, the kind of glow up that should be studied in universities for a PhD in bad bitchery. Now, I want you to get this picture in your head. Picture a sprawling master bedroom, walls the color of a soft morning fog, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over a perfectly manicured Atlanta lawn where the sprinklers just finished their morning ballet the night before they were scheduled to cut my girl Keisha's breasts off to save her life. Her husband, Dante, was packing a suitcase. A smooth black Toomey leather suitcase she had bought him for their 5th anniversary, the one he said he'd only use for their trips to Paris. She was sitting on the edge of their big California king bed, the one with the 1,000-thread count Egyptian cotton sheets that felt like cool water against her feverish skin. Her body felt weak, fragile as spun glass, her mind just a fog of fear and anesthesia pamphlets. A single diptyque baize candle flickered on the nightstand, a scent she usually loved, but tonight it smelled like a funeral. She saw him folding his crisp, custom-made shirts, the ones she always took to the specialty dry cleaner on Peachtree, and in her innocence, in her blind, all-consuming love for this man, she thought he was packing for the hospital stay. She thought, oh, bless his heart, he's going to stay with me the whole time. He's going to be there. She asked him, her voice barely a whisper, hoarse from a day of silent crying. Baby, did you pack my warm socks? The fuzzy gray ones with the aloe lining? My feet get so cold in hospitals. He stopped. He didn't turn around for a full 10 seconds. His back was to her, a broad, muscular back she knew better than her own. The silence in that room was so loud, it was like a scream. The only sound was the whisper-quiet hum of the air conditioning and the frantic, terrified thumping of Keisha's own heart, a drumbeat of doom against her ribs. And when he finally did turn, the look in his eyes, Chile, it was like looking at a stranger, cold, empty, dead. He looked right through her, not at her, as if she were a ghost already. He said, I'm not going to the hospital, Keisha. I'm leaving. She just stared at him, her brain short-circuiting, unable to connect the words to reality. It felt like he was speaking a foreign language. The sounds were familiar, but the meaning was gibberish. Leaving? Leaving for what? Baby, the surgery is at 6 a.m. It sounded so stupid, so naive, even as it left her lips. Her mind was scrambling, trying to find a logical explanation. Was there a work emergency? A family crisis she didn't know about? Is it your mom? Did something happen? She asked, her voice trembling with a desperate hope for any other answer. And that's when he dropped the bomb that shattered her whole world. He zipped up that Toomey suitcase, and the sound echoed like a gunshot in their quiet, beautiful bedroom. He walked over to his dresser, a mahogany piece she'd found at an antique market, picked up his Breitling watch, and slid it onto his wrist without even looking at her. He said, I can't do this, Keisha, I can't. He finally met her eyes, and there wasn't a shred of pity in them, only irritation. I didn't sign up for a sick wife. I didn't sign up for this mess. I need a whole woman, not a patient. I have need. He walked out the door of their beautiful master bedroom, the one she had decorated with her whole heart, the one where they had made love and made plans, the one they were supposed to grow old in. He walked right past her while she slid off the bed and collapsed onto the floor, the plush cream-colored carpet doing nothing to soften the blow to her soul. She just crumpled like a piece of paper. He thought he was leaving a dying woman. A broken half woman he didn't want anymore. He didn't know he was leaving a woman who would rise from the ashes of that fire and make him regret the very day he was born. You see, before all this, Keisha and Dante were that couple. You know the one I'm talking about. And the ones whose Christmas cards make you feel a little bad about your own life. Perfect smiles, perfect clothes, perfect background. They had a sprawling 6-bedroom home in a gated community in Buckhead, the kind with a perfectly manicured lawn and a 3-car garage that housed her Mercedes G-Wagon and his Porsche Panamera. Dante had an architectural firm, Dante Designs, but let's be clear, Keisha was the engine that made the whole thing run. She had the MBA from Wharton. She had the vision. She was the one who could walk into a room of stone-faced investors in their Brioni suits and walk out with a multi-million-dollar contract. She handled the clients, the books, the marketing, the strategy. She was the one up until 2 a.m. poring over spreadsheets and zoning regulations while he was out networking at the latest cocktail bar. Dante was the face, the handsome, charismatic architect who could charm a zoning board into approving anything. But Keisha was the foundation, the steel beams holding the whole thing up. She poured her soul into that business, into him, content to be the ghostwriter of his success. She loved the work, but more than that, she loved him. Building his dream was her dream. She was the kind of wife men write poems about, or at least they should. Stunning, even on a Tuesday morning with her hair in a messy bun and no makeup on. She kept a home that looked like it was perpetually ready for an architectural digest shoot, hosted dinner parties where the wine flowed and the laughter was loud and genuine. She remembered his mother's birthday and sent orchids. She picked up his dry cleaning without being asked. She made sure his favorite obscure brand of Ethiopian coffee was always stocked. She knew he liked his towels folded in thirds and the remote control placed on the left side of the nightstand. She curated his life down to the smallest detail, and she did it with joy. And on top of all that, she was building his empire right alongside him. Her name not on the door, but her fingerprints on every single blueprint, every single contract, every single dollar they made. She loved that man with a purity that was almost painful to witness in hindsight. They met in college. He was the campus star, the charming artist with a sketchbook full of dreams and a smile that could melt glaciers. She was the quiet, brilliant business student who saw the genius under his swagger. She helped him organize his portfolio, wrote his business plans for class projects, tutored him in the subjects he found boring but were necessary for his degree. He told her she was his muse, his rock. On the night he proposed, he took her to a bluff overlooking the city lights and told her, "With your brain and my vision, we can build an empire, Keisha. But I can't do any of it without you." She believed him. She believed every single word. When he walked into a room, her whole face would light up. It wasn't an act. She believed in him, propped him up, polished his crown, and never once asked for the spotlight. Her reward, she thought, was their life and their love. She was a ride or die through and through, and she thought he was too. The first sign of trouble was a crack so fine she could barely see it. Her name was Brianna, his new fitness trainer. Suddenly, Dante, a man whose idea of a workout was walking to the fridge, was obsessed with the gym. 2 hours a day, every day. He started using words like macros and optimization. "It's all about pushing the limits, babe," he'd say, flexing in the mirror, admiring his newly defined biceps. Keisha, bless her trusting heart, was just happy he was taking care of himself. She even met the girl once at a company party Dante insisted on inviting her to. "She's a great motivator, babe, great for networking," he'd said. Brianna was all high ponytail and taut muscle, 25 years old with an empty-headed giggle and an ambition in her eyes that Keisha was too in love to recognize as predatory. Brianna looked at Keisha's life, at her Chanel bag hanging on the back of a chair, at the 3-carat diamond on her finger, and saw a shopping list. She wasn't looking at Keisha. She was looking through her at the prize. She complimented Keisha's dress a little too enthusiastically, her eyes scanning it like she was calculating the price tag. "Oh my God, I love your dress, Keisha. It's so, classic." The word hung in the air, a polite way of saying old. The late session started. Keisha would call Dante around 7, expecting him to be on his way home, and he'd be out of breath. "Just finishing up a killer session with Brianna, babe. Gotta cool down." A little knot of unease would tighten in her stomach, but she'd swallow it down. "Don't be that wife. She'd tell herself, he loves you. You're being insecure." She found a receipt once for a delicate gold necklace from Tiffany's, stuffed in his gym bag. When she asked him about it, he'd laughed it off. "Oh, that. It was a birthday gift for my mom. I just forgot to take the receipt out." And Keisha, who wanted to believe him, who remembered that his mother's birthday was 6 months away, chose to believe the lie. She was so busy running their life, their business, that she didn't have time to listen to that little voice, the one that's always, always right, the one that was screaming, he's lying. One night, he came home smelling faintly of cheap cherry blossom perfume, a scent so different from her signature Chanel No. 5. When she mentioned it, he blamed it on someone at the gym. "You know how those places smell, babe. A mix of sweat and cheap body spray." He was getting good at lying. Real good. Then came the diagnosis. It started with a routine mammogram. She almost skipped because a big client from Dubai was in town. A callback, a biopsy. Keisha went to the appointment alone because Dante had a huge can't-miss once-in-a-lifetime meeting that he swore he couldn't get out of. She sat in the cold, sterile room, the paper gown crinkling every time she dared to breathe, staring at a poster on the wall about the benefits of flossing. She remembers the feel of the cold gel on her skin during the ultrasound, the sharp, painful click of the biopsy needle, and then the doctor came in, his face a mask of professional pity, and said the word: malignant, aggressive, stage 3. The world just went silent. All she could hear was the blood rushing in her ears, a roaring sound that drowned out everything else. Breast cancer. It felt like a death sentence. The doctor started talking about treatment plans, a whirlwind of terrifying words: double mastectomy, chemotherapy, radiation. It was a blur. All she could think was, I have to call Donna. He'll fix this. He'll hold me and we'll figure it out. When she told him that evening, he actually played the part of the devoted husband for a little while. He held her while she cried until she was dehydrated. He said all the right things, the lines he'd probably seen in movies. "We'll get through this, baby. You're a fighter. We're a team." He held her hand, looked into her eyes, and promised her he wasn't going anywhere. For about 3 weeks, she clung to that promise like a life raft in a hurricane. But then the reality of it, the ugly, inconvenient reality, started to set in. The surgery was scheduled. The conversations turned from we to you. "You need to rest. You should eat better." He grew distant. He stopped touching her. If she reached for him in bed, he'd flinch just for a second before pretending to be asleep. The nights were the worst. When she'd break down and cry from sheer terror in the middle of the night, he'd roll over annoyed and let out a heavy sigh. "Keisha, you have to be strong. All this crying isn't helping." The gym sessions with Brianna got longer, more frequent. The texts he'd angle his phone away to read became constant. The man she loved was fading away, replaced by a cold, resentful stranger who looked at her not with love, but with irritation. She was a problem he wanted to solve by ignoring it. She was losing her hair from the stress, her energy, her sense of self. And she was about to lose her breasts, the parts of her body that, to her, felt so intrinsically linked to her womanhood, her sensuality. She felt like she was being dismantled piece by piece, and the one person who was supposed to be her rock was the one wielding the chisel. Which brings us back to that night, the night he packed his bags, the audacity, the absolute bottom of the barrel, trifling audacity of that man. To look at the woman who built you up, the woman who is facing the biggest, most terrifying fight of her life, and tell her she is not whole enough for you. To leave her on the floor in a heap of fear and betrayal the night before she is wheeled into a cold operating room to be cut on for hours. There is a special place in hell for a man like that, baby. A special, fiery, miserable place with his name on the door. Keisha had to call her best friend Monique at 2 a.m. She could barely get the words out through the ragged sobs. "He's gone, Mo. He left me." Monique didn't even ask questions. She just said, "I'm on my way," and showed up 15 minutes later in her pajamas, her face a mask of thunder, ready to burn Dante's entire world to the ground. She found Keisha on the floor, still in her silk pajamas, just shattered. Monique didn't say a word. She just scooped her up off that expensive carpet, held her, and let her sob until there were no tears left, just dry, ragged gasps for air. The next morning, it was Monique who drove her to the hospital. It was Monique who filled out the forms because Keisha's hands were shaking too much to hold a pen. It was Monique who held her hand until the nurses came to take her back. As they wheeled her down the sterile white hallway, Keisha looked at the empty chair in the waiting room where her husband should have been. And a cold, hard resolve began to form in the pit of her stomach. It was a tiny little ember, almost smothered by the grief, but it was there. She was alone, and she was going to have to save her own damn life. Waking up from the surgery was a disorienting nightmare. The pain was a searing, white-hot fire across her chest, but it was nothing compared to the phantom ache where her breast used to be, and the gaping hollow ache in her heart where her husband used to be. She felt hollowed out, mutilated. She refused to look down at her own body for a week. Monique was her rock. She changed her bandages when Keisha couldn't bear to look. She spoon-fed her broth. She fought with the nurses to get her better pain medication, and she screened her calls. She was the partner Keisha was supposed to have. And Dante. Oh, he sent a text. A single text message 2 days after her double mastectomy. It said, "Heard it went well. Take care." Take care. The sheer nerve, as if he was talking to a distant cousin he'd run into at the grocery store. Monique had to take the phone away before Keisha shattered it against the wall. In that moment, looking at those 3 callous words on the screen, something inside Keisha died. The naive, trusting girl who loved Dante was gone forever. The weeks that followed were the darkest of Keisha's life. She went home to that big, empty house that no longer felt like a home. It felt like a museum of a life that was no longer hers, and every room was filled with ghosts. His clothes were gone. His photos had been removed from the frames, and half the money in their joint savings account vanished. He had moved in with Brianna, the fitness trainer, and the ultimate slap in the face. He was posting pictures on social media. Him and Brianna on vacation in Mexico, staying at a resort Keisha had bookmarked for their 10th anniversary. Him smiling with a margarita in his hand, his arm around this young, perky girl in a bikini with the caption, "Living my best life with my queen." Another picture showed Brianna's feet with a fresh pedicure propped up on the dashboard of Keisha's G-Wagon. The caption read, "Enjoying the ride." He was taunting her. It was psychological warfare. Meanwhile, Keisha was pale and terrified in her empty house, a drain tube still sticking out of her side, preparing for her first round of chemotherapy. The cruelty was so profound, it was breathtaking. Chemo was hell on earth. It ravaged her body. The nausea was constant. Food tasted like metal. She was so weak. Some days she couldn't even make it from the bed to the bathroom without clinging to the walls for support. And then her hair started to fall out. It started in small clumps on her pillow, a few strands at a time. Then in the shower, it came out in handfuls, a wet, sad knot clogging the drain. It was the final humiliation. She sat on the cold shower floor, bald patches on her head, her body scarred and weak, and she just screamed. A raw, guttural scream of pain and rage and grief that came from the deepest part of her soul. Monique came running in. She saw Keisha, saw the hair matted on the tile, and her face hardened. Without a word, she went to the kitchen, got a pair of scissors and an electric razor. She came back, sat on the floor with Keisha, and said, "All right, if it's going to go, it's going to go on our terms. New beginnings." And right there on the cold tile of the bathroom floor, surrounded by the evidence of her loss, Monique helped Keisha shave the rest of her hair off. They cried together, but then something shifted. When it was done, Keisha looked at her reflection in the steamy shower door. She saw a stranger, a bald woman with dark circles under her eyes, scars hidden beneath her robe. She looked broken, but for the first time in the set of her jaw, in the fire in her eyes, she also saw a warrior. She saw a survivor. That was the turning point. That was the moment the ember of resolve started to glow hot. The fight back was long and brutal. There were days she wanted to give up, days the loneliness was a physical weight on her chest, heavier than any depression. She'd scrolled through Dante's social media, torturing herself. He and Brianna had taken over her life. They were at her favorite restaurants, hosting parties in her house, driving her car. He had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. In the legal papers, his lawyer argued that since she was sick and couldn't work, he was entitled to the business and the house. The man had no bottom, but with every stab of pain, that ember inside Keisha got hotter. Her anger started to turn into fuel. Her grief started to turn into cold, hard determination. She finished her chemo. She finished her radiation. She walked into her doctor's office 6 months later, and he told her she was in remission. She had survived, but now what? She was bald, scarred, and in her mind, ugly. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She felt like a ghost in her own life. One day, Monique showed up with a big, fancy box. Inside was the most beautiful, expensive wig she had ever seen. A custom human hair wig that looked exactly like her old hair, only better, healthier. Keisha stared at it for a long time before she put it on. She looked in the mirror, and for the first time in a year, she saw a flicker of the old Keisha. It was like putting on a suit of armor. Then Monique, who had been watching YouTube tutorials, did her makeup, a little concealer, a sweep of blush, a bold red lip, and Keisha stood up a little straighter. She started a blog. She didn't even know why at first. She just needed to write to get the poison out. She called it Phoenix Rising. At first, she wrote anonymously. She wrote about the betrayal, the fear, the loneliness of the 3 a.m. panic attacks. She wrote about the physical and emotional scars of cancer. She wrote about what it felt like to lose your sense of beauty, of womanhood, and to feel like a stranger in your own skin. And people responded. Women from all over the world started commenting, sharing their own stories of loss and survival. "Me too," they wrote. I thought I was the only one. "Your words are giving me strength." Then Keisha did something brave. She posted a picture, 2 pictures side by side, one of her on the bathroom floor mid-chemo, looking frail and bald, tears in her eyes, the other of her in her new wig and makeup, that red lipstick a slash of defiance, looking strong. And she wrote about the journey between those 2 photos. She wrote about finding beauty after pain, not in spite of it. The post went viral. It was like a dam broke. Her blog exploded. Media outlets started calling. She realized she had tapped into something profound. the shared experience of women who had been made to feel less than, whether by illness, by men, by society. She started reviewing products, skincare that was gentle enough for post-chemo skin, headscarves that were stylish and comfortable, wigs that looked natural and gave you back a piece of yourself. She was honest, she was raw, she was real. And her following grew from thousands to millions. That's when the business idea hit her like a lightning bolt. She would create her own line. A line of beauty products, luxurious skincare, vibrant cosmetics, high quality wigs, specifically for women going through trauma and recovery. She would call it Phoenix Beauty. The tagline was Beauty for the Battle and the Aftermath. It wasn't about covering up the scars. It was about celebrating the survival. She took what little money she had left from the divorce settlement, which she fought for, tooth and nail, with a shark of a lawyer Monique found for her, got a small business loan, and poured every ounce of her being into it. The lawyer, a fierce woman named Helen, had helped Keisha prove in court that she was the intellectual and strategic force behind Dante Designs, entitling her to a significant portion of its value. It was a brutal fight, but Keisha won. She used her story, her platform. The launch was a phenomenon. The products sold out in hours. Women weren't just buying makeup, they were buying a piece of her story. They were buying hope in a bottle. Within 2 years, Keisha was not just a survivor, she was a CEO. A self-made millionaire. She was on the cover of Forbes, not as the wife of Dante, but as Keisha Williams, founder of Phoenix Beauty. The glow up, as the kids call it, was biblical. She went through reconstructive surgery, but on her own terms, for herself, with the top plastic surgeon in the country. She hired a personal trainer, a real one, a woman in her 50s who talked about strength, not macros, and got her body back stronger than before. Her hair grew back thick and healthy, but she kept rocking the wigs because she loved the versatility, the power of transformation. She bought a penthouse apartment downtown with a floor-to-ceiling view of the city she now owned. She traded in her old SUV for a cherry red Porsche 911. She was more beautiful than she had ever been, but it wasn't the makeup or the clothes. It was the light behind her eyes, the unshakable confidence of a woman who had walked through hell and come out on the other side, not just intact, but stronger, wiser, and more powerful than she could have ever imagined. She was, in every sense of the word, a whole woman. A woman she had built herself from the ashes up. And Dante, oh baby, karma had been watching. The universe was just waiting for the right moment to cash in those receipts it had been holding on to. While Keisha was building an empire, Dante's world was crumbling. Without Keisha's brain and relentless work ethic, the architectural firm started to bleed money. He was good at schmoozing, but he was terrible at managing finances and retaining talent. Clients left. Projects fell through. He was trying to maintain the lavish lifestyle for Brianna, buying her things he couldn't afford. But the money was drying up fast. Brianna, the fitness guru, was not interested in a man on a budget. The argument started, first about the credit card bills, then about everything else. The resentment grew. She was there for the whole man with the fat wallet and the house in the suburbs, not the stressed out, failing businessman. And then it happened. One Tuesday morning, Dante was in his car, screaming at his accountant on the phone about a missed payment when a blood vessel in his brain decided it had had enough. A massive stroke. He was lucky to be alive, the doctor said, but the damage was catastrophic. The entire left side of his body was paralyzed. He was confined to a wheelchair. His speech was slurred and difficult to understand. The handsome, charming architect was gone, replaced by a slurring, helpless man who needed assistance to eat, to dress, to go to the bathroom. And Brianna, Chile, that girl didn't even wait for him to be discharged from the hospital. As soon as she understood the word permanent, she packed her Lululemon leggings, cleaned out what was left in his bank account, and was gone. Her parting words to his sister, who had to come and deal with the mess, were, "I'm a fitness trainer, not a nurse. I don't do wheelchairs." The irony was so thick you could choke on it. Dante lost everything. The business went bankrupt. The bank foreclosed on the house. Keisha's house. He ended up in a small, depressing state-funded apartment being cared for by a rotating cast of overworked and underpaid home health aides. He was broke, he was broken, and he was utterly alone. All he had was time to sit in that wheelchair and stare at the water-stained ceiling and think about the diamond he had thrown away to pick up a worthless piece of stone, which brings us to the climax, the grand finale, the moment we've all been waiting for. 2 years to the day after he had walked out on her, Keisha was having a book signing. She had written her story, a memoir also titled Phoenix Rising. The event was being held in the grand ballroom of the St. Regis, a chic downtown hotel. The place was packed. Her fans, her Phoenix Army, were lined up around the block, all clutching copies of her book. Keisha looked like a queen. She was wearing a custom-made floor-length gown in a shade of red so powerful it could stop traffic. Her makeup was flawless. Her hair was styled in a sleek, elegant bob. She was sitting at a table, a radiant smile on her face, signing books and talking to the women who adored her, her voice warm and gracious. She was the picture of grace, success, and triumph. Suddenly, there was a commotion near the back of the room, a ripple of murmuring. People started parting like the Red Sea. And through the crowd came a wheelchair pushed by a weary-looking aide in scrubs. In the chair was Dante. Girl, he was a ghost, a pale, disheveled shadow of the man he used to be. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by cheap gray sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. His face was slack on one side, a little bit of drool glistening at the corner of his mouth. His eyes, once so cold and arrogant, were now wide and filled with a desperate, pathetic plea. He was wheeled right up to her table, cutting the line. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. All eyes were on Keisha, her smile frozen on her face. His aide leaned down and whispered something to him, and then Dante looked up at Keisha. His voice was a thick, garbled mess, but in the dead silence of that room, the words were clear enough. Keisha, he slurred, his good hand trembling on the arm of the chair. I made a mistake. Keisha just looked at him, her expression a perfect unreadable mask of polite interest. She didn't say a word. She just let him squirm in the silence under the weight of 100 pairs of eyes. He started to cry, big, fat, ugly tears rolling down the slack side of his face. You look so beautiful, he stammered, his voice cracking. I see you everywhere, on magazines, on TV. I'm so sorry, Keisha. I was a fool. A stupid fool. She left me. The money's gone. Everything is gone. He reached out a trembling hand, his good hand towards her across the table. You're the only one who ever really loved me, Keisha. Please, please take me back. I have nowhere else to go. You can forgive me, right? You have to. The audacity, the absolute unmitigated gall of this man. To crawl back, not out of love, but out of desperation, to demand her forgiveness as if it were something he was owed, another service she was meant to provide. Keisha slowly put her pen down on the table. She stood up, the red dress flowing around her like liquid fire. She was a goddess, and he was a bug on the floor. She walked around the table and glided towards him. The whole room held its breath. People probably thought she was going to hug him. They thought this was the moment of Christian forgiveness, the prodigal husband returning. Oh, but they didn't know Keisha. They didn't know the woman who had clawed her way back from the grave. She knelt down gracefully on the balls of her Louboutin heels, so she was eye level with him in his wheelchair. She looked so compassionate, so kind. It was chilling. She leaned in close as if to whisper a secret, her expensive perfume enveloping him in a cloud of everything he'd lost. Her voice was soft, smooth as silk, but the words were forged in the fires of chemotherapy and betrayal. She whispered, just for him to hear, Dante, Do you remember what you said to me the night you left? His eyes widened in recognition. He remembered. Oh, he remembered. She continued, her voice dropping even lower, laced with pure, uncut ice. You said you needed a whole woman, not a patient, because you had needs. She paused, letting the words hang in the air between them, letting him drown in them. Then she gave him a small, tight, merciless smile that didn't reach her eyes. Well, I need a whole man, Donna, not a patient. She leaned back and her eyes did a slow, deliberate scan of his body, from his slack face to his useless legs. And I'm not a nurse. With that, she stood up to her full, glorious height. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream or cry. She simply turned to her head of security, a large man named Frank who looked like he was carved from granite, and said with calm, unshakable authority, Frank, could you please escort this man out? He seems to be lost. It was a public execution, delivered with the quiet dignity of a queen. The crowd erupted not in applause, but in a collective gasp of shock and righteous awe. Frank and another guard gently but firmly wheeled a sobbing, babbling Dante out of the ballroom and through the lobby, his pathetic cries of, Keisha, please, echoing behind him. Keisha didn't even watch him go. She turned back to her adoring crowd, smoothed down her perfect red dress, picked up her pen, and said with a brilliant, genuine smile, Now, who's next? Later that night, after signing every last book, she walked out of the hotel into the cool night air. The valet pulled up in her red Porsche, the engine purring like a contented panther. She tipped him $100 bill, slid into the driver's seat, and took a deep breath, smelling the rich leather and the scent of victory. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel vengeful. She felt peace. She felt free. As she pulled away from the curb, she glanced in her rearview mirror, and she saw him, Dante. The hotel staff had left him on the sidewalk like a piece of luggage. He was just sitting there in his wheelchair under the harsh streetlights, a pathetic, lonely figure, watching the taillights of her success, of his own discarded happiness, disappear into the night. He had thrown away a diamond, and now he was left alone in the gutter with the stones. And Keisha, she just turned up the music, hit the gas, and drove off into her beautiful, new, whole life. Now you tell me, isn't Karma the baddest chick on the block? Never, ever let anyone tell you your worth, baby. Especially not when you're down. Because when you rise, you don't just rise, you soar. You remember that.